Good afternoon. We're so glad to have you with us today for this next series in our Envisioning Equity time. We're going to be talking about healthcare today, specifically talking about a model for service learning and mentorship that addresses the need for minority representation in healthcare. And we're just so excited about this session that's going to happen today. Just by way of a few brief examples and cautions around our homework for today as far as our way that we're going to produce our session together is that we will be recording the session. So you might see that button come on. And then also, if you have a question, if you would look at the bottom of your screen next to the chat, you'll see that there's a little button that says Q&A. If you have a question, if you would just hit on that and then put it into the Q&A, then those questions will be addressed as we go throughout the session toward the end. And then also, I would invite you, as you listen today to our speakers and to our main speaker, that you would listen for words that sound like this: equity and health disparities, health inequities, how those are compared and contrasted. One of the reasons I invite our listeners and participants to pay attention to these words is because we all define them just a little bit differently. And so I'd like to invite you to listen carefully to how you hear those talked about today in terms of those who are sharing with us today. Then today our moderators are Dr. Lauren Barron and Dr. Stephanie Boddy. Dr. Barron is the inaugural DeBakey Professor. She is chair for medical humanities, and she's also clinical professor, and she's also director in medical humanities. And so she has the DeBakey chair there, which is not only the inaugural chair, but also the endowed chair for that particular area of our work. Dr. Boddy is our assistant professor for church and community ministries. She's in the Anna R. Garland School of Social Work, and she's also a teacher over at Truett Seminary, and she also teaches in the School of Education. So without much more ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Barron. Dr. Barron, it's all yours, so please take it away, my friend.
Thank you, Dr. Yancey. Just absolutely delighted to be here today and cannot wait to hear more about what Dr. Renee Krishlow has to share with us. Dr. Krishlow's been a full spectrum family physician, also doing obstetrics for over 20 years, and she's lived and worked in both rural and urban underserved communities. She was the inaugural holder of the McBaird Endowed Chair for Advocacy and Policy at the University of Minnesota. And just very recently, in February of 2021, she moved to Boston to take a new position as the Boston University Vice Chair of Health Equity for the Department of Family Medicine, and also serves as Chief Medical Officer at Codman Square Community Health Center. Her very first faculty position was as an attending physician at UC Davis on the whole other side of the country, with a joint appointment in the Department of Family Medicine and OB-GYN. And from 2003, she was faculty at the University of Washington at the Montana Family Medicine Residency. Then she served as an assistant professor and director of advocacy and policy at University of Minnesota Department of Family Medicine. And she's done so many things that I don't want to take up the time for her presentation to explain, but she's done it all. And she's been a longtime participant in pipeline development programs, and she's going to tell you what she thinks about the word pipeline, including being the founding physician for the Eastern Montana AHEC. And I'm a huge fan of AHEC, Area Health Education Council, and I hope there's some AHECers out here in this audience today. And then she developed the ladder. So go to the laddermn.org. And she calls this a cascading mentorship program that encourages youth from low-income communities to pursue medical careers. And that's what we're going to hear about today. Dr. Krishlow, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Barron. Appreciate it. As always, enjoy coming to Baylor, whether it's physically or mentally. So we're just going to get started. Sharing my screen. And if I don't hear from anyone, it means I'm sharing my screen appropriately. There you go. Okay, so the latter, model of service learning and mentorship, addresses the need for minority representation in healthcare. If I have to say why it's important to have minority representation in healthcare, then we're going to have a much longer much longer lecture. So let's go forth and with our objectives. Basically, we're talking about the ladder, which is our organization, big things we do, teeth growth mindset, describe cascading mentorship, and basically let's look at the different rate limiting steps there are in healthcare career pipeline. So the actual objectives, learn why, how, and what we do at the ladder. If you want to change the system, if you want to actually change the results of the system, you have to change the inputs and the feedbacks. Every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it gets. That's just the way it works. We're in a situation where basically we have a lot of inequities, a lot of disparities in the outcomes for our healthcare system. But this is the system we have. And if we want to change it, we have to address in an equitable manner changes that can get us the outcomes we're actually looking for. And I'm talking about equity in a big way because I want to be really clear that equality can't fix inequities. You can't give all the same resources and expect inequities to change. Perfect example is one of the things that crunched my soul when I first heard it. I was at a workshop with an organization that was a foundation in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. One of the CEOs of the funders stepped up and she said, Sesame Street was a failure. And, you know, I'm Gen X and those are fighting words because, you know, I can count to 20 in Spanish because of Sesame Street. There's no way you can tell me that Big Bird was a failure. But from a funding perspective is what she talked about. She's like, Sesame Street was brought in because there was a gap in the ability of kids who were entering kindergarten. They had the white suburban kids and minority kids were coming in with fewer skills, fewer language abilities, fewer math abilities. So Sesame Street is designed to close that gap, give everyone an opportunity to learn how to count to 20, to learn their ABCs, to learn that cookies are good things. So they looked at the results. They said, okay, great. Sesame Street did great. The minority kids were able to do those things when they were showing up in kindergarten. But the white suburban kids were still ahead of them. They'd watched the same show and gotten further along because they started further along. The gap remained. When I heard that funders considered Sesame Street a failure because of that, I decided I don't want to deal with funders that much anymore. So when we started the ladder, we made a few very good choices, I think, to help us get through that initial outcome stage. Equity is what can actually make a difference. Equity is putting resources where they're needed the most and they'll do the most good. Perfect example in American history is the Rural Electrification Act. I'm a history buff and I'm going to drag you all with me, but trust me, it turns out interesting. In like 1935, pre-World War II for us, about 11% of rural America, 11% of rural America had electricity. And it was clear that the private industry was not interested in going into these very sparsely populated areas and creating an opportunity for electrification to come to these households. So the government invested in rural America with low income, no fault loans. The idea was they would allow the local area folks to take that investment and build electricity co-ops and get electricity in their farmhouses, in their ranch houses, in their barns, allow them to use all the equipment that was state of the art, but needed energy and electricity. So by the end of the project, so starting in 1935, about 11% of rural America, project actually ended mid 1960s, and over 95% of rural America had access to these electricity co-ops. And that investment allowed our entire country to advance by leaps and bounds because we put resources where they were needed the most, and it allowed our whole country to get ahead. So my definition of equity Thank you, Dr. Yancey. Investing resources by centering at the margins, putting the resources where it's needed the most, it shifts the whole system to the better. We have examples of it happening, it working. Apparently it's not Sesame Street. So education and health. Why is this an important part of what we're talking about? Because, one has a very large impact on the other. And just because they happen at the same time, you can't really say, is it chicken or the egg? It doesn't matter. It's real. When you look at life expectancy, not having a high school diploma, for men, 9 less years of life. For women, 8 less years of life. Name me one medication that we routinely prescribe that has that level of impact on life expectancy for an entire population. This education is one of the best ways that we improve healthcare outcomes. And giving people an opportunity to understand that it is a path towards not just health of your body, but health of your life. One of the things we've talked about is is higher education. This is a great advantage, but is higher education a sieve or can it be a ladder? Is a sieve, is it just sort of weeding out those nuggets that are already there? As a ladder, is it something that we can all rise on? These are the questions we were asking. Basically, 2012, I was living in Minnesota. This is the Academic Health Center at the University of Minnesota. It is not a pretty building, but it does a lot of really amazing things. And teaching there was a great opportunity for me. The Minnesota and Minneapolis area, very different from where I was practicing in Minnesota and in Montana. North Minneapolis was the neighborhood that our residency program was in. North Memorial Family Medicine Residency Program, part of the archipelago of the University of Minnesota Department of Family Medicine. This is Broadway. This is our outpatient clinic. This is Broadway about 3 days after Mr. George Floyd was murdered. There were protests and there were also riots. And in our neighborhood, right across the street from our clinic, about 5 buildings were burned and our clinic and offices were ransacked. So what did we do? We got together with our community because we'd had a long-term relationship with our community. In our parking lot became a resource fair. And for the next few weeks, it was one of the few places in the neighborhood where people could get groceries. They could get staples like, things like diapers, masks at the height of the pandemic. We became a place that worked with our neighborhood because our neighborhood trusted us for lots of reasons. One of the biggest ones is we've been there for 45 years. So where are we? That red circle in the far left-hand corner, that's where North Minneapolis is. Life expectancy at the time that this was done by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation was about 70 to 75 years. 3 miles up the road, an area that corresponds with about Prospect Hill in Minneapolis. 3 miles up the road, you have 13 years increasing your lifespan on average. 3 miles and means 13 years. And when we talk to folks, when I present this, a lot of times people are like, oh, well, those, I say, what's wrong? What causes this? And they're like, oh, well, the doctors in that neighborhood must not be very good. I was like, no, I'm a doctor in that neighborhood. And I trained most of the other doctors in that neighborhood. There's good doctors there. Biggest issue that Robert Wood Johnson and a lot of us came to realize is that health begins where we live, learn, work, and play. 80% of our healthcare outcomes come from those factors. Social determinants of health is another way we like to put it in academia. But really, where we live, learn, work, and play, largest impact on our healthcare outcomes. Also, think about it, largest impact on our educational attainment, those things. It is sort of curious that social determinants of health and social determinants of education are so similar. and we have to address them in that manner. We can't just, I love being in the exam room with my patients. I love being in the hospital and taking care of my patients. If I really want to make an impact, I understand as a family doc, I have to work with the people in my community to help those spaces where they live, learn, work, and play be an environment that promotes health. So we asked every kid, still do, what do you want to be when you grow up? A lot of kids, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a nurse. Looked around at the medical school, was not seeing kids from North Minneapolis. For quite a while, until University of Minnesota made some significant changes in their admission approach, it was the whitest medical school in the country. It used to trade off first and second with another place that will remain nameless. But they made some very concerted efforts to understand that if they wanted to take care of their entire population, they needed to find a way to admit their entire population. So, why do I have a picture of a model of an airplane? This is one of those times when I usually ask my friend, Dr. Levy, I'm like, Dr. Levy, what is this? Because he's a real history buff. Basically, this is a model of the Royal Air Force, British Air Force airplanes returning to their hangars during World War II. And I put returning to the hangars as a very important part. Every single red dot is an area where they found that the fighter planes had received damage. And they thought initially, they're like, oh, look at all these places where the plane has received damage. We need to reinforce these places where the damage was done. And then one guy stood up and said, okay, let's keep in mind, these are the planes that made it through. These are the planes that returned. What we actually need to consider is that the areas where there are no bullet holes, those are the areas that have had the greatest effect on these planes. Those are the areas perhaps that we need to reinforce. And I bring this up because a lot of times we look at sort of what you could call a survival bias, and we make our policies based on who's actually made it through. When it's part of what we need to think about is who's not getting through and why. Which one of these planes didn't return? The planes that didn't return are the ones that had bullet holes in the areas that are not present there. So, pipelines. Dr. Barron knows I hate the word pipeline, and I'm going to explain why. Because basically, pipelines, my dad is a petroleum engineer, and so I'm well aware that pipelines are both expensive and leaky. And the idea of making a workforce pipeline frightens me, because spending a lot of money and not getting any change is something that can actually happen, and something that actually has happened. Between the 1970s and the early 2000s, there was not an increase in African-American men in medical school. Millions and millions of dollars were spent on pipeline programs, all this kind of things. At one point, there were fewer African-American men in medical school in the early 2000s than they were in the 1970s. Something else is going on. And using the same types of programs and getting no good results repeatedly, it's time to sort of have a wake-up call. Let's talk about what the pipeline looks like. And I'm using mostly stuff from Minnesota right now because I just got to Boston. So big things, big reducing valve areas, high school and SAT. About in Minnesota, African-American on-time graduation at the time when I first did this was 51% on time, meaning within 4 years. College and graduation rates within 4 years, about 29%. So you've already reduced a significant number of people. Then you get to the point where medical school applications, this was in 2018, 2019, there were basically 69 African-American applicants from Minnesota, and 21 of them entered medical school in some part of the country. And this is all from WAMC data. So that's a significant level of reduction, but it also started out with a contracted level of input. The on-time graduation rate not so great. And that, from then on, the funnel just gets thinner. And you see, this is disproportionate across our ethnic and racial spectrums. And as you will hear me say repeatedly, race is a social construct. Race is not real, but the consequences of our society making race, those consequences, the social consequences of race are real. The biological construct is not real. But as I said before, and I'll continue to say again, and this is one of my favorite memes, I really like this guy because he's willing to have a conversation about anything. So what are some of the possible issues that change that number of African-American, and I'm doing primarily African-American in this presentation because the starkest differences in our country are white middle class and African-American students. That's the starkest contrast that we can put forth on a consistent basis. So what does it take to get into medical school? You have to have a great application. All you guys got great applications. And that's the thing. You all worked very hard to get where you are. That doesn't take away the fact that it's hard to get into medical school for many reasons. Building an application costs time and money. You need time to do leadership activities. You need time to do research. You have to have connections to do all those things. You need time to do unpaid internships, international activities, fly over to Africa, cure leprosy, money for test prep, money for actually taking tests multiple times, money for applications, secondary applications, which I got to tell you, I think that that's one of the most heinous things that has come into medical school. The idea that you have to pay again, that's a little bit of a grift as far as I'm concerned, but I digress. Money for travel to interview, all these things. It's the latest data that I saw is it takes about $10,000 overall to get to the point where you're applying to medical school. And the thing is, I've had a lot of underrepresented minority students from every part of the level of learning talk to me, and I talk to them and I always challenge them, like, yeah, you need to take your test again so you can get a higher score because it's close, but it's not quite close enough. And they're like, I can't afford to take this test more than once. I couldn't even afford to take it the first time. I had to do this and this and this to take it. Leadership activities. I had one young man, a young African-American gentleman. He said, Dr. Critchlow, I don't have time for more leadership activities. I lead myself to school. I lead myself to work. I lead myself to study, and I lead myself to sleep. These are the things I have time for. And if I don't do those things, I will never be able to get through. Unpaid internships, one of the biggest things you can have in your application. I had one student, she called me and informed me, she's like, I just got offered to do senior research assistant this summer at blah, blah, blah emergency room. Very highly reputable emergency room, would look great on anybody's CV, anybody's application. I said, great, you got to do it. And she's like, I can't do it because I have to work in order to keep my family housed. And that's a really, really frightening place to be. It's like this young woman, hardworking, smart, opportunity presented that would really put her over the top. And she can't do it because her life needs to have paid employment, either stipends or whatever. Unpaid internships definitely are an area that is, I believe, time has come and gone. Money for test prep, all these kinds of things. And you think about it, well, does it really make a difference? And I'm going to tell you, I don't have any investment in any of these companies. I'm not advertising for them. I'm just putting up there that there are within the marketplace, people who were saying, we will guarantee you. Give us $2,000, we'll guarantee you give us $3,000. We'll guarantee you an MCAT above 510. There are a lot of places that will not even interview anyone that doesn't have an MCAT above 510. And this is a place that if you can plunk out $3,000, they'll guarantee you that. I'm not saying that people don't get these grades on their own without this kind of input, but I am saying that if you came up through a school that was marginal in its ability to actually grow your intellect and ability, taking a test prep course like this could be the thing to put you over the top, but you still have to have $3,000. One of my favorite ones is the $8,700, and this was a couple of years ago, so it's probably a little more by now. For $8,700, you get the premier admissions counseling, basically full support on your primary and secondary applications. They'll give you practice interviews, live prep, and you have a personal concierge counselor that you get to unlimited access to. Now, there's a lot of people that got into medical school without this. There's actually a few that have got into medical school with this. Not to say they shouldn't be there, but I'm saying, what is our ability to actually get our meritocracy, even the playing field? Where are the inequities and how can we address them? So when we started the Ladder, which is our mentorship group for kids from underrepresented minority, lots of times low wealth communities, we thought that we were trying to expose kids to healthcare careers. We're like, oh, if they find out more, then they'll want to be doctors. There were already a lot of people who wanted to be doctors. There were already a lot of people who applied to medical school, people who had done their college work, graduated, applied to medical school. In 2018, 2019, the matriculants and applicants, and this, like I said, this is just Black applicants, over 4,000 Black applicants. Matriculants, meaning those who actually got into medical school, about 1,500. You have to ask yourself, what was the difference? What is the issue? What are the challenges? Who made it through? Who did not make it through? And what do we look for when we're building that pipeline? Are we looking at the people who made it through and building something based on them? Or should we perhaps be looking at the people who did not make it through and look at expanding the pool of applicants, look at expanding the pool of applicants who can succeed? Do we need to change the path of success if we actually want to address inequities in healthcare? Because one of the biggest ways we can address inequities in healthcare is addressing inequities in healthcare workforce. So how? I'm going to be playing a video.
I always wanted to be a doctor, but I don't have a doctor in my family, so the original goal was to be a truck driver, like my dad. Oh, but that didn't work out. My dad was like, no, you can't do that. The way I got involved in medicine was through a program called The Ladder, through shadowing experiences as a high school kid and an undergraduate student. The Ladder really allowed me to see more of what doctors do, and it just allowed me to believe in myself, because also the people who came to the Ladder were a lot of doctors who looked like me, who are people of color, Black people, women. I saw a couple of Muslim women coming to mentor people in the Ladder, so it felt more achievable.
We invite these young kids that think that someday they might want to be a physical therapist or a nurse or a doctor or a vet. And there are medical students, residents, faculty, community physicians that are there and are able to provide some guidance and some mentorship to help show them what that path might look like for them.
So this is for kids, and they come and do cool science projects, and then they get to see adults being in medicine and caring about them and getting to interact with them, and they get interested in science. Science is sometimes not the most popular subject in school, but it can be fun, but it's important to be able to know that it is an opportunity and available to become a physician.
This community is unique. So many of them have been through so much trauma, not just over the past year, but really lifelong traumas. And what we take the approach of is helping to understand some of that background and realize how those experiences have shaped people into who they are today.
These are providers who are providing care, but also concerned about what's going on in the North community. Activism, the needs of our community that are outside of clinical care, but impact the outcomes of our patients who are struggling with chronic conditions.
Many of our patients really enjoy and embrace being part of the education for the residents that are here. They feel they play a role in training this next generation of family medicine physicians.
They're not just, a building in North Minneapolis, where people come in and out. They're really like part of the community.
That's why medicine is so important, because it enables the deep wells of your personality as a clinician to be committed to the benefits of somebody else.
It was a good opportunity. It was something that kids like us in Northside never usually get the opportunity to do stuff like that. There's this one time my sister, we had a ladder program and it was finishing up and we were taking everything down. And my sister was like, can we do a day on infectious diseases? And then the next month we did a topic on infectious diseases. And my sister was like, I'm never leaving this program because like what I say actually matters. And so, yeah, I don't think, without the ladder, I don't think I would have been standing right here.
To elicit the highest talents and the most cardinal virtues in people and focus them is one of the most ennobling parts of medicine.
Okay, thank you. So that was Aisha's story. And she's someone that started with us when she was in her, I believe, junior year of high school. And now she is currently in her 4th year of medical school. And she demonstrates one of the biggest tenets that we're trying to bring to the ladder is let's expand the pool of people. Let's expand the different paths to success. A lot of us are just trying to recruit the same people from a very small pool. I'm at Boston University right now, and one of the things that they talked about was the underrepresented students that got accepted to Boston University also got accepted to about 8 other medical schools. That just means that everyone's fighting over the same small number of people. Let's expand that group of people. Let's expand the path to success. Let's expand it so folks like Aisha can be a part of the community of healthcare workers. So, lift as you climb, build as you grow. That is our motto. And that's our purpose and that's our structure. Basically, every second Saturday prior to the pandemic, every second Saturday of the month, we'd get together. There's an intro, there's value and appreciation, there's a meal, because it's important to eat together and share stories. That's how you build communities. Eat together, share stories, work together. That's why the setup and the takedown is with everyone working together. We have the rotation stations. So basically there's 3, 15 or 20-minute stations where hands-on learning is the key. People learn how to use defibrillators, fake ones, but they learn how to do suturing, except if you're 9 years old. Then you learn how to cut sutures. We do intergenerational learning time. And the rotation stations are really the ones that we want people to feel like they're learning what it takes to do healthcare and that they're capable of that. We do our wrap up and then we do our pledge. So the intro basically talks about, the ladder, lift as you climb, build as you grow. What's the ladder? And this is literally the slides we use. It's like you're the ladder, us together. Society of Medical Scholars age 9 and up. We say, what's a scholar? A scholar reads, a scholar listens, a scholar teaches, and a scholar learns. And I let them know. I'm, in the real world, I'm the esteemed Dr. Renee Critchlow, and they all laugh because I said esteemed. And then I say, here, I'm medical scholar Renee. And these are my responsibilities and my duties, and these are your responsibilities and your duties as you take up the mantle as a scholar. Our core values about respect, learning is winning, and losing is just another chance to learn. We teach failure as one of the best teachers. That's one of the things we reinforce. Core values, reading, 30 minutes a day, that stuff that's not even beyond homework. And as I said, building these kinds of muscles, building these kinds of expectations are a part of what we're giving to our kids. Until we start at 9 years old, middle school, high school, undergrad, medical school, residency, community docs, faculty. We have nurses, nurse practitioners. We have physical therapists. We've got pharmacists that would never miss a visit, never miss an event. And these were all the things that we did in person before the pandemic. Support, one of the biggest things we want these young kids to know is it's okay to be smart. It's also okay to be curious. And you don't have to know the answers, but you can find out and you can ask questions. Structure, basically service learning, leadership development, cascading mentorship. And we integrate that all throughout the participation. We have various committees where people have participate, and it's intergenerational. The committees run the structure of the ladder, and everyone is involved, and leadership development is at every level because people take responsibility for each other. They take responsibility with the cascading mentorship as a key part, is that you are responsible for mentoring those that are younger than you, and you're responsible for being someone that other people can mentor. And we like to have fun. We have a lot of fun. It's not worth it if you can't have fun. We talked about mentorship. We always talk about mentorship is support plus challenge. That's what equals mentorship. If it's just support, then you're just a cheerleader. If there's just challenge, then you're just a jerk. So cheerleading jerk, mentor, yay. So, and then we always go on to what the day's learning is. One of our big ones every year is sports medicine. We have a very, very capable sports medicine presence. Dr. Dave Olson on the far right there, he is a family medicine doc, and he is the leader of our sports medicine program. And he comes in with his sports medicine fellows, and they teach our kids. And they have, it's usually one of our best attended. They put on cast, take off cast. You have to tell them they can't wear the cast home, but they can take it home once it's removed. All these kinds of things, hands-on learning, get people excited. We also want our folks to know there's lots of different ways to succeed. There's not just one path. And so one of the things that we wanted to be very clear about is our kids are going to know that there's lots of different ways, lots of different types of ways to be helpers. And value of nursing, respecting nursing, encouraging nursing, of the folks we have going to school, including, I believe, one of Aisha's sisters, people are going to nursing school also. We're very proud of that. So we go to what we call value and appreciation. After we do the presentation of what the ladder is, we do value and appreciation, and we say, these are the two quotes we're going to discuss today. And when you're in your eating groups, we're going to have you choose one of these quotes, introduce yourself, and say why I choose this quote. The reason we do that is because we want people to engage with each other, and we want people to hear stories of what it takes to succeed in school, what it takes to succeed as a doctor. I always start out with a sort of example. I'd say, I'm medical scholar Renee. I'm going to choose failure doesn't mean the game is over. It means to try again with experience. And I said, the reason I chose that is I went to 3 different undergrad institutions before I graduated. I had 3 different places. I didn't enter medical school until I was 27 years old. And now I teach at one of the finest medical schools in the country. I can't tell you how hard it is for some people to fail, but failing is actually just the best teacher. And I came back each time and got further along, and now this is where I am. In the communities that we serve, a lot of times talent is considered the only way you achieve. And if you fail even once, it means you're not talented enough and that you should quit. We push back on that very hard. We're like, if you're not failing, you're actually not pushing yourself far enough. It is a unique perspective for some of these kids, and it's one that it really helps them keep going. So lift as you climb, build as you grow. And we end with our pledge, and I'm gonna, in a couple of seconds, have the pledge played on our YouTube thing. We designed this pledge to basically express our values and the challenges that we're giving to each other. So take a listen, and trust me, we'll give everyone the slides that they want. So I'm going to stop sharing.
We believe our true self is wise and compassionate and seek to know the self. We take full responsibility for our choices. We take full responsibility for our actions. We strive each day to appreciate the good in ourselves, our community, and our lives. We are determined to correct any mistake that we may have made and determined to take the right action now and in the future. We embrace the truth that each day we can be the right person and do the right thing starting now. We seek to see the best parts of others and speak directly to that being. We seek to see the good in our communities. We seek to serve the positive works in our communities. We seek knowledge and desire to act from wisdom. We will spread by our actions and our lives the principles of a successful community. Lift as you climb, build as you grow. We know we will succeed because we will never give up. This I pledge.
So, the ladder. That's our pledge. We say it at the end of every meeting. I have alumni who, to this day, will tell me that, oh, I read that. It's still on my desk. I have it. And when I feel I'm going to get burnout, I go and read it again. And then they send me pictures to prove it. So, what the ladder is, what the ladder isn't. Ladder is a community of purpose. It's a path. It's not a pipeline. Community of purpose is something where we invest in each other, and we are intergenerational. We have our own culture that reinforces the values that we purport. Basically, we wanted to build an organization that models the path of success, a resilient organization, mission-driven, growth mindset, supported and interconnected. What the ladder isn't, we're not a quick fix. Next year will be our 10th year. And we've had our successes, but they are not successes that would have pleased the Sesame Street funders, but they are successes that has expanded the pool of people at every level, bringing in more underrepresented minorities into medicine at pretty much every level and supporting them as they grow. And we didn't want it to be a source of research. Our community that we'd served had too often been just someone's footnote in their career building research. We wanted to be able to stay long, stay lean, so we could actually make a difference. Big principles: long-term commitment, adapt to local conditions. Lean, interconnected organization, so that we are part of the community and we don't need a lot of money in order to succeed at the chapter level. Each one teach one. Cascading mentorship is a critical part of both how we succeed and how each person succeeds in the ladder. Outcomes: members who are all mentors. Everyone knows the path to success, full of failure and perseverance. Growth mindset being key. Understanding that you can't do this alone and we have to help each other. And everyone modeling for each other. And as I said, continuing to build that community of purpose. And when we succeed, we help others. And when we help others, our community succeeds. So these are quotes from different folks who have been a part of the ladder, primarily underrepresented in medicine, undergrads, medical students, and residents. Why I attended the ladder? I think the big reason it's part of the ladder is for the representation as well as the support. See both sides. Representation, also getting support. For minority students in particular, it's easy to see musical artists, entertainers, sports like you, but it's less common to see people in professions like medicine and law. They get to see that at the ladder. When I was looking for a program to do my training, this is someone who was looking for a residency. I wanted to find one that really allowed me to engage and give back to the community. North Memorial had the ladder. I wanted to be able to meet and share stories with aspiring or current learners in the medical field, to be inspired by others who were ahead of me in their training, and to have fun. Personally, it was not about moving forward, it was about reaching back and pulling somebody with you. Further outcomes. Basically, the goals we were looking for: increase academic faculty diversity by actually showing not that we are committed to our neighborhoods, but we're actually engaged with our neighborhoods. Increasing medical school diversity. When choosing medical schools, we wanted the folks who had been with us to stay with us because they felt like they had a community that they belonged to. One of the biggest impacts that we had that was surprising was the fact that a lot of our older docs that would come, they were like, this is the only thing that's stopping me from being burnt out right now. And we were very surprised. Our students were at the point where we were looking back, none of them had gone into suspension for any reason. And in our community in North Minneapolis, it was in the state the highest level of middle school suspensions and repeat suspensions. And as you guys know, repeat suspensions is one of the leading entry points for the school to prison pipeline. So keeping people interested in school, keeping them supported in school, we believe is one of our biggest contributions. So long-term investment, commitment to the community, building a community of purpose and a culture of purpose. And basically, one of the things that we did, we stayed very lean for a very long time. You know, for imprisoning one youth for 1 year, we could run 33 chapters of the ladder. To maintain an organization that could run 33 chapters, we might need a little more money. But each individual chapter is something that can be in any locality. And we're also looking to expand to the level of rural communities, because it's one of the things where if you grow up in a rural community, it's less likely you get exposed to the kinds of things that will actually facilitate your ability to get into medical school. So we also think of rural students as underrepresented in medicine, and an area we'd like to contribute to changing. So 3 miles, 13 years, life expectancy difference. We won't change this overnight. And the presence of having more URM doctors is not the only way that we change this. But the fact that we can center on changing the number of underrepresented in medicine folks means we actually have to change the way medical education is done. And changing the medical education is done may actually be one of the best ways that we all move forward. When I talk about the fact that we need to change the way medical education is done, for kids who didn't go to the high-powered schools and get the high-powered education, learning is a process that involves people teaching you. And in medical school, think about it. Do we really teach you guys anything? There's very little teaching in the first couple of years. They put stuff on the PowerPoint and they say, memorize that PowerPoint stuff and we're going to test you on it. And then we are going to make you take step 1 and then we're going to make you take step 2. The fact that taking tests and memorizing is the key factor that we have in success in medical school, it's not a good measure of who's going to be a good doctor. We have to increase the multiple paths to succeed, to become a good doctor. And I believe part of that is actually changing the structure, changing the system. This system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. We change the inputs by actually letting people in who have the capacity to be good doctors and giving them an education, as opposed to what they've done with us. You know, we all made it into medical school. We were the planes that made it back. We made it through all the rough things. And then medical school right now is one of the most dangerous places for a student to be. the level of stress, the level of, and if anyone is in this situation, please contact help. The number of people who've committed suicide just in the last year is terrifying. The whole system's not working. We've got to change the path to success. And one of the ways we do it is, get rid of pipelines. Let's make communities. Let's support each other. Let's help each other learn. So, the ladder, what is it? This young man, his name's Anthony. He came to us when he was an undergrad. He's now in his last year of medical school. It is a very big part of the ladder that we have our residents and our medical students, and it gives them a chance to feel a real part of what they said they wanted to go into medical school for, to help communities, to help people's lives change. Every part of it, faculty, community docs. This woman is Dr. Sarah Indianajanwoha, and she is our board chair now. We're now a 5013C. This was, I believe, 6 years ago. This is Christopher, and Christopher's story is tied very closely to the ladder story. Christopher, the very first meeting we had of the ladder, very first meeting, we were all very eager. We went to the facility, we set up the room, we had all sorts of different hands-on things. There were like 30 adults, and then Christopher showed up. He was the only kid to show up at our first meeting. One kid showed up, he was about 9 years old. And this is him, I think, as maybe 10. These are some of the medical students who helped us establish the ladder. Quite a few of them are actually in faculty positions around the country right now. This is Dr. Vivian Mouchet. She started with us at the ladder as a second-year medical student. So that's Christopher again. And that was when he was about 10. This was him in middle school and with a young guy who was the age that Christopher started with the ladder. Lift as you climb, build as you grow means also participating in the programs as a teacher, as a learner, as a participant. This is actually Aisha when she was in undergrad. This is Anthony, Alan, and Nirmal. They were some of the first people that we had directly go from the ladder to medical school. Nirmal is a non-traditional student who returned to medical school, I think, in her early 30s. Oh, and that's Dr. Shaili Prasad in Minnesota. He is my twin. We're basically twins. So, community of purpose, pipeline of purpose. So, I always have this poem in my in my presentations for the last couple of years, because I feel that it is my mission in life to remind people to live life with purpose. And what is it? There's a thread you follow. It goes among the things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you're pursuing. You have to explain about the thread, but it's hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and you suffer and you get old. Nothing you do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. My thread is to find a lot of different ways for all of us to succeed in medicine, because I think that is the way that we address health disparities. It's not one size fits all. This is Dr. Minerva Nanton, MD, PhD on your far left, Dr. Lonzel Ramsey over my shoulder, and Dr. Zia Okocha to the far right. All folks who came to our program explicitly expressing their desire to participate in the ladder. So this picture is one of my favorite. It's like a little mini ladder. In the middle is Christopher. And Christopher, as you remember, started when he was about 9, and he's way over here on the ladder. And the kid standing to his right, sorry, to his left is a young man that's the same age that Christopher was when he started. And to his right is Dr. Lonzel Ramsey, who started with the ladder when he was in medical school. And said, member Dr. Vivian Luce, for me, the ladder felt like a safe place, a place of building community, mentorship, inspiration, a place to have fun while teaching and rising medical scholars who aspired in the field of healthcare, a place to be inspired by the same scholars as well as senior medical scholars. I'm a gathering of supportive and uplifting people, a refreshing place to see kids of diverse backgrounds having fun while learning about healthcare. Dr. Luce last year joined the University of Minnesota as an assistant professor in the Department of Pediatrics. She started with the ladder when she was a second-year med student. She went on to her pediatrics residency and then did a fellowship. Came back to the University of Minnesota with the intent of being a professor. She is on the path. And if you like those pictures that we showed before, she's actually the person who took those pictures. Still involved with the ladder, 8 years later. Dr. Eduardo Medina. Dr. Eduardo Medina also started as a second-year medical student in the ladder. He's now this year become the co-instructor for the MD-BA program at the University of Minnesota. And Dr. Lonzel Ramsey, who we mentioned before. Dr. Lonzel Ramsey is officially now the newest URM faculty member at the University of Minnesota Medical School. And that's 3. Those are 3 people that came up through the ladder. People who will give you, from their mouths, express purpose that one of the reasons they went into medicine went into the School of Medicine as faculty was because they wanted to continue to do the kinds of things that they did in the ladder. So this picture is one of my favorite pictures. I feel like it's the ladder in one perfect photograph. At about 6 o'clock on the clock is a young lady. She's 9 years old at the time this picture was taken. At about 11 o'clock is a young lady who was in undergrad about the time that this was taken. The gentleman in the maroon t-shirt was in medical school at the time. He's now done with residency, pediatrics. The doctor at about 4 o'clock is Dr. Minerva Nanton, as we saw before. And the patient on the table is Dr. Nanton's continuity patient for prenatal care and obstetrics. Dr. Nanton is a family medicine doctor. This patient was one of the volunteers that came to the ladder to help us do a prenatal day. It was amazing. The biggest thing I want you to see is the level of trust that patient has for Dr. Nanton. That's the kind of thing that we're looking for. We're looking for many different paths for people to succeed. We're trying to create a space where many different kinds of people can feel safe in medicine. And the ladder it's the community that we're using to do it. We will be, we're 9 years old this year, our 10th year is next year. And we're now 5013C, and we're really, really impressed by all our members. And most of all, I'll tell you, one of the biggest things that happened was during the pandemic, our medical student and residency members basically joined up with local groups in North Minneapolis to find ways to provide 10,000 masks to the people of North Minneapolis. This is before the mask mandate at the beginning of the pandemic and before PPE was available. A lot of folks, it was all about making and building cloth masks and distributing that with education. This is the kind of leadership that we wanted to cultivate in the ladder. And it continued with the fact that they set up what we call now the virtual ladder. And the virtual ladder has been online through Zoom for the last, since last year about this time actually, run mostly by our residents and specifically a lot by our medical students who are involved. So we want to continue this and we want to bring it back in person as soon as we can. So make sure everyone gets vaccinated. And I think we're ready to have questions. thank you guys very much for letting us share what we're doing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Krishlow. It's just fascinating, inspiring, and want to invite all of our guests that are here with us to submit questions. I'd like to introduce my partner, Dr. Stephanie Body, who is Assistant Professor of Church and Community Ministries, and together she and I are teaching our class, Disrupting Racial Disparities in Healthcare, together, of which this speaker series that you're here for as Dr. Krishlow is an important part. So again, want to encourage everyone here to submit questions, and I will take the privilege of asking the first one, and that is about the capacity to replicate this. Now, I don't want to turn it into some kind of machine or something like that, but what would you say to those of us here who would be interested in trying to initiate a program like the Ladder in Waco, in another community? What would your advice to us be?
Well, my biggest advice is don't reinvent the wheel. We actually are looking, one of the goals of our 501(c) is to expand different chapters of the Ladder throughout the country. We have what we call our 2.0 toolkit that provides sort of almost a turnkey operation of how to get things started. One of our long-term goals is to provide support to those chapters. So things like, you don't have to write your own curriculum. We've been doing this for 9 years. We'll send you, 2 years worth of curriculum. We don't want you to make the same mistakes we did. We'll give you the hints. Definitely, partner with an institution that doesn't use their building on Saturdays so that you don't have to pay rent. Work with the local pipeline communities to get people where you share your ideas, but you also share your students. So we have a desire to actually expand this. And we are at the point as a 501(c), we're going to be actually in about a month doing our first major fundraiser. And one of the things we're doing that for is so that we can have staff to support other chapters developing this kind of change in our approach. We want everyone to be able to expand the pool of applicants and expand the pool of people that can succeed.
Are you aware, or I don't know if you're at liberty to say, or if there are, tell us about other communities that are contacting you and that are interested in doing this.
So prior to the pandemic, we had, there was Minneapolis had a chapter of the Ladder, St. Paul had a chapter of the Ladder. There was a chapter in Madison, Wisconsin. There was a chapter, Northern California, I believe was Santa Clara. And so we're hoping to get those back up and running as the pandemic goes away. And now that I've gotten to Boston, oh my goodness, these people, they want to, one of the place I'm chief medical officer at, our health center, we actually have a high school that's within the health center. And we are definitely going to be looking to start a chapter in Boston. And we've gotten lots of interest from the different schools around here.
That's terrific. Dr. Body?
Great, yes. So I guess my question is wanting to hear a little bit more about your mentoring. I really liked your definition that it's support plus challenge. And so can you tell us a little bit more about some of the ways that you challenge the students that you work with?
Yeah, one of the things that is a critical part of mentorship is building that relationship so that trust exists. Because when we give feedback, they trust that we have their best interest at heart. And I think one of the biggest challenges a lot of Black and brown students have at many levels is people don't know how to give us feedback. They think if they give us feedback that they're going to be, racist or bad. And inevitably, that just means a lot of things pile up and we don't succeed. So I am very clear. One of the things I'll talk with the different kids about is like, how's it going into class? What's challenging? How how are you going, and I don't fix the problem. I'm like, how are you going to address that? I had one, Christopher actually, when he was doing his PSAT, he's like, this is the grade I got. It's like, that's an excellent grade. You need to do better on your SAT. And he did. And it wasn't because of me, but he had that support to do the extra thing and to know that I believed that he could do the extra thing. That's one of the most important things I think we do at the Ladder. We believe in our members because we believe in humans. Honestly, I work from an unconditional love. I think everybody's awesome. I just have to help them see that they're awesome and then support them in their awesomeness.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Could you say more, Dr. Krishlow, about, I thought it was really interesting what you said about we're not doing this as a research project. You know, this is not somebody's dissertation. Could you say more? I'd love for our attendees to hear more about that, about where that's coming from. They may not be as familiar with what you mean by that.
Yeah, so one of the things, and I'll be really clear, I love academia. My dad was a professor. I love teaching. I love the, pushing the boundaries of knowledge. It's important. One of the challenges we have, though, is that when we go into a community, especially a community we're not a part of and we're not working with, when we go into a community and we say, hey, I got this great grant for 6 months, we're going to see how adjusting school lunch works for kids doing on their tests. We're going to do that. We're going to test that because we have funding. And they go in and they do that. Let's say it works. Let's say it works great. And then they're like, okay, thank you. Bye. And then the project that they did, that they brought in without asking, had an effect, for good or ill, and had an effect, and now it's not sustainable. And basically, that researcher just used that community. And I know we don't mean to, but that's what happens when we just treat people like they're in a petri dish and not in a neighborhood. Whereas when you know they're in a neighborhood and you become a part of serving that neighborhood, that's a totally different event. And not having, 3-month-long projects that, may or may not work. These people do not want to be treated like guinea pigs. One of the problems we're having with vaccination hesitancy is that people in these communities, Black and brown communities, are very often, they're not wrong, they're treated like guinea pigs. So finding ways to work with communities, finding ways to do the research on outcomes the community actually wants. Talk to them. Hey, we're going to do this. We want to do something. What would you like us to examine? What would you like us to do with you? So that's the kind of approach we're looking to. So yeah, don't treat people like bacterium in a petri dish.
Right.
Thank you. When I first heard about your project, the thing that I was most excited to hear about was the ways that you were helping students to beat the odds. I'm now, after hearing about your project, I'm more excited that it sounds like your project isn't only about beating the odds, it's about changing the odds. Is that accurate? And if so, could you say more about that?
Yeah, no, that's 100% accurate. What I always say, if I had a box full of 50 marbles and I had one hole and the marker of success was getting marbles out of that box. If there's only one path, how quickly or how many successes are we going to have? I look at the ladder as expanding the pool by creating lots of different paths to success. People who have very supportive environments, very good schools, they can be a part of the ladder. They are part of helping each other grow. People who are marginal existence. One of the reasons we have the same meeting place, same time every month is because we have a lot of kids that will move 6 times in a year, but they know that they'll always be able to come back to the ladder because we'll always be there at the time that they're expecting. Lots of different paths to success, critical part of expanding the pie, getting more people the capacity to stay lean, stay long.
Okay, thank you.
Could you say something, Dr. Krishlow, about how you intersect with other agencies or initiatives? So one example would be the fact that there's a program here in the Waco Public School System called GWACA, Greater Waco Advanced Healthcare Academy, where they're working with high school students. We host an AHEC branch. The residency program has an AHEC branch. I see lots of different programs and initiatives. So could you say something about either how you intersected with them or sort of your philosophy about how to do that and kind of leverage those connections?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do is we're like, okay, let's say you're in an AHEC program and you're undergrad. Great, come to the ladder and mentor the younger folks. Let them know about the AHEC. And for the people in the AHEC, honestly, the ladder came out of an urban AHEC. That was, the AHEC is gone, the ladder's still here. But it's really about asking folks, come share, come be a mentor, come be a part of the support. And one of the big things, especially for the Black and brown kids at different levels, is sometimes it's the only place where they're not the only Black or brown person in the room, whether it's from undergrad or medical school, or even their own clinic as a resident. So overlapping people, mentoring each other.
Okay. Are there other kinds of organizations that you partner with? One of the things we saw in the comment was that congregational buildings are often available as places to work. So are those partners that you've worked with, congregations?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Actually, I believe the St. Paul chapter is in a church that's available on Saturday afternoons, and all sorts of partners. One of our biggest partnerships that we try to build is with after-school tutoring programs. Be like, oh, okay, well, your kids are doing that, and once a month, let's support them and mentor them. One of the other places, Big Brothers and Big Sisters. We've had folks, because like I said, it's an intergenerational learning environment. So a lot of times, if the kid's been in the ladder for a while, very often the mom, dad will just drop them off, say hey, and pick them up in 2 hours. It gives mom and dad a break, and they know it's a safe place. Initially, a lot of folks come and they'll stay for the first time with their son or daughter, or cousin or granddaughter. It's one of the things where we have the intergenerational thing there so that people can see that lots of different people interact that way. And the Big Brothers and Big Sisters are folks that show up and with their little sisters and little brothers a lot.
Okay. So you mentioned creating a community and that parents and grandparents are dropping their kids off. Are there ways that you engage the parents and the grandparents in these types of programs? Because for some families, they're a little leery about their children getting involved because they don't want them to grow up and move away and go to college and medical school.
Yeah, no. So one of the things that I think is a challenge is that idea of if you pursue this, you'll leave us. So one of the biggest things we do is bring the family into the matrix. And it's like when they drop them off, I feel it's like mentoring parents too. I'm like, oh, Christopher is doing such a great job. You should totally be proud of him. He has the ability to go far with this. And it's one of the things where people, they don't fear change, they fear loss. And if you can make this change into something that they're not losing their child is gaining an amazing experience, then that can help contribute to their ability to deal and cope with those different levels of change. But it's not about having the family as an outside thing. We bring them in whenever possible. And like I said, a lot of times folks will stay and hang out. And then they'll like leave halfway through. Sometimes they're, oh no, you guys are doing great. I'm gonna go shop.
Nice, glad to hear that.
I'm aware of lots of different projects like, Black Men in White Coats. And we had some students start an organization called Healthcare is Hers. These were women of color mentoring high school students that were also women of color. And I'm wondering if you could say something about that in terms of sort of segmentation or fragmentation that I wonder if that could weaken some of the efforts. I'm not sure how to think about that.
Yeah, no, so one of the best parts of that is that's why the cascading mentorship is so helpful. Because, yeah, let's say hers in medicine, great. They have middle school, high school people coming, but who's mentoring the young women who actually started that organization?
Great.
And how awesome how awesome would it be for them to learn together, once a month, being in an environment where they're equals, and they're all scholars. And the mentorship that can happen for the people who founded these organizations is also very big and very important, because a lot of times when it's one and done, you're the only person there, and no one wants to be the only person there. So yeah, gather the whole crew, and they can support each other and we can support them.
Yeah. Yes. So it sounds like there's a multi-directional mentoring would be another way of talking about cascading, that it's not what you typically think of in mentoring is unidirectional.
Yeah.
So there's like a network that you've created, and that's why it seems to work to have other organizations being a part of it.
100%.
Yes. So some colleagues of mine, we've started a program or a project called Growing Leaders and Learners, and we're primarily connecting social workers, science educators, and engineers to help students, because one of the barriers often to getting into medicine is I'm afraid of math, I'm afraid of engineering, I'm afraid of science. Perhaps I would like to consider being a nurse or a doctor or physical therapist, but if I'm afraid of these courses, then how do I bridge that gap?
Yeah, no, I think that hits a nail on a lot of heads. And one of the things that we like to engage with is supporting the kids at the youngest age possible to know that, you don't have to be a genius, you have to be curious and work hard. And teaching them that, I have to ask for help. Everyone has to ask for help. You don't succeed unless you ask for help. And also letting them know it's okay to want to do those things. The last part is letting them know that that kind of thing needs to be done. If no one tells you that you need to take certain courses in high school in order to get into college, how are you going to know? So it is all that kind of exchange that's really helpful. And it's, giving them the confidence to know it's like, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep growing and stay curious.
And again, respecting the fact that, like you said, it's going to take, a very long time. This isn't a quick fix. And also tremendous respect for the power of the individual relationships and the individual connection. I'm just wondering about, I'm going to say the F word, funding, just wondering about that in terms of working with, funding organizations and other partners that might be willing to get behind you, what you're sort of imagining moving forward.
Yeah, so the big thing that we're going to help people understand is it's not the numbers, it's the process. And if you invest in the process, you get the numbers. The fact that University of Minnesota now has 3 new URM faculty is huge. And to get that, we spent maybe $9,000 over those. It takes like $250,000 to recruit a doctor to some health systems. So our real thing is stop thinking that numbers can happen at the end of each quarter. Say, okay, we want to support the process. What process is in place and how are you guys monitoring that? Yeah, we're not going to have 60 people come out of the ladder, but we may have 60 kids actually think it's okay to graduate high school on time. And you know what? They get to live 10 years longer. I think that's pretty successful.
Absolutely.
Wow. Have you published any of, again,
No, this is the year of publication.
Got it.
And it's mainly because we've gotten to the point where the outcomes are, it's not about the children. We've got grown-ups who want to preserve the ladder, and one of the things they want us to do is make sure people
know about it.
Yeah, what can help, what can happen.
Right. Yeah. Dr. Body?
Yes, so one of the outcomes that you mentioned was decrease in suspension. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so one of the things that basically one of the parents mentioned that their son was doing well. And in their school, there were a lot of suspensions. At that point, we basically that was sort of a contact the parents kind of thing. And it was interesting because we presented some of that to our Board of Regents. And one of the Board of Regents said, how do you know that it's, the kids that go to the ladder are not the kind of kids that get suspended? And I was like, yeah, I don't care. I don't care. The fact is that it's helped them. Mm-hmm. And don't tell your Board of Regents you don't care. Just, piece of advice.
Well, for the students and the guests we have today, I'm wondering if you might have any last words of advice or wisdom for them in terms of advocacy and in terms of being a part of something like this. And let me just say in parentheses, a lot of times I feel like students are thinking, if I could just get to this place, or I'll get to this next level, or I'll get to this next, this step in the ladder, then I'll turn around. And I'm just wondering if you could say something about wherever people find themselves, how they could be engaged.
Yeah, no, so one of my quotes that I absolutely love and I repeat constantly is from Arthur Ashe, who was an African-American tennis player when I was growing up in the 70s. And his quote, he says, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. And I like that because it's not about, oh, I have to fix everything. No, do what you can from where you are. And you may be surprised what you have to offer. And one of the things I will be really clear about, a lot of Gen Z folks ask me, is like, what does the future of healthcare look like? What is the world going to look like? I want to be really clear and honest with you. It's going to look like what you make, because you're the largest generation ever to live in this country. You are going to be the ones that decide what healthcare looks like. So you might as well get in there and get involved, because if it is lead, follower, get out of the way. And I believe that you guys have a lot to offer. So what's it going to look like in the future? Whatever you make it look like. And the ladder is one of the ways that we hope we can make it look like a compassionate, caring place that helps each other succeed. So
thank you so much, Dr. Crichlow. We just can't thank you enough. And it's given us a lot to think about and talk about in our class and beyond with different partners in the community. Now I would like to introduce Cuevas Peacock. And Cuevas is the Assistant Director of Community Relations and Cultural Wealth with the Office of External Affairs here at Baylor. And Cuevas is going to take us out.
Yeah, thank you again, Dr. Crichlow, for your amazing presentation. I learned so much, and I am just so excited about what you're doing in your community, and hopefully we can do a version of it in our own. Thank you as well, Dr. Barry and Dr. Body, for your leadership on this effort. and for continuing to progress Envisioning equity through the focus on healthcare inequities. Going forward, our next Envisioning equity will be taking place on November 18th. We'll be shifting our focus to financial security. The topic for today is the modern day impact of redlining. So we're looking forward to having a discussion with our panelists and to seeing how that does redlining impact us today. Additionally, I want to remind you all to take part in our Go Gold sponsorship program, with discount program, where anywhere throughout Waco, by visiting the website link, you can identify where you can go and unlock discount deals and specials with your Baylor ID. And with that said, I just want to say thank you again to Dr. Renee Critchlow, to our panelists, to our moderators, to Dr. Yancey, and to all of you for deciding to join us and to participate and to view this great particular presentation. Have a great afternoon and enjoy the rest of your day.